Howdy YouTube family, it's Bolt CRNA coming to you again with another day's topic. Today I want to talk to you guys about what it is like finishing up second year and starting third year, what it feels like to kind of be towards the last leg of the journey, at least the last year, the third year. And I also have some questions I asked you guys on Instagram if you had any questions you wanted me to answer about a week or so back, and so I've picked some of those out and I'm going to answer them for you today. So let's get into it. A lot of you guys saw on Instagram the other day when I posted that picture of the sunrise coming up and me saying that it was my last final of CRNA school. So a lot of you already know I took my last final a couple weeks ago. It feels like a huge weight off of my shoulders. It's actually still trying to sink in. I don't know how to really react to it because I don't have something to study right now. Of course, boards. I have boards I can study for, and there's a whole mountain of that. But as far as like actual academic CRNA school classes go, there's nothing. I've finished all of them. There's still this summer, we're gonna have a couple research courses that we have to take, and there's our DNP project that we have to work on. So there's a lot of assignments to get done, but as far as like cramming 80 hours a week for new anesthesia material that I've not learned before, I don't have to do that ever again. Now it's just trying to assimilate all that data that I've learned over the past 2 years and make sure that it's all at the front of my mind and that I can actually use the information and actually be prepared to take boards. So what my typical schedule looks like now is Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday we have clinical rotations. That is only going to be until July, and then we'll switch into 4-day-a-week clinicals, which will be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then this summer we don't have to be on campus at all. Our classes that we take, they're all online. They're research courses. We do meet one day at the end of the semester in the beginning of August, and we meet as a whole class and we have to get together and present projects and get in front of the class. And pretty much every single semester they will find at least one opportunity where you will have to create a project or do research that will be presented in front of your peers. Sometimes you'll do it more than once a semester. So that will be at the end of August, and actually we have to create a project, a quality initiative project on the unit that we're rotating on right now. We have to figure out something that they're lacking on, whether it be education on regional blockade or pediatric intubation techniques, or if we just see something that they're weak on and we go and start doing research on it, and then we create a whole change to their policy, in theory, a change to their policy. We present it to them as, you could change this, this, and this, and you would improve, your stays in the ICU this many days, or whatever it is you're trying to do. You're trying to improve the way their workflow happens at that facility. So anyway, it's just trying to build that muscle in your mind that you are a DNP student and that you're going to be a DNP CRNA. And so your job in that role is to question the way processes are done, figure out the newest and most efficient research and the best evidence-based practice out there. And if your facility that you're working in isn't doing that, then you create the research for it and you change it in that facility, or at least work to change it in that facility. So that's part of what we're doing this summer. It's a lot of that kind of stuff, lots of research, and also increasing our clinical days that we're in the OR. We also transition into our specialty rotations, which is pretty much your entire third year of CRNA school. My program is specialty rotations, so I'll have pediatric anesthesia as my first specialty rotation, and then I'll have cardiac, and then I'll have OB, and then I'll have neuro anesthesia. So I'll have a lot of different types of specialties for the next, till Christmas. I know my schedule as far as that goes. But that's our clinical rotations. We're also gonna, as you switch into third year, you also have to start taking call on the weekends. You have to start maybe working night shifts if they need you to take night call at the surgery center or at the hospital. You have to do that. You're a lot more independent. You're a lot more used. Some facilities that you go to will use you as staff, which means they put you in a room and an anesthesiologist oversees you, but they oversee you like they would oversee a CRNA. and so they're not in the room with you. They leave you in the room with the surgery, and they go about, and they can monitor, I think it's up to 2 residents or SRNAs at a time. So you might have him monitoring, the attending anesthesiologist might be monitoring a resident in one room and you, the SRNA, in another room, and he might be going back and forth between both rooms, and if you need him, you can call him. But essentially in third year, you're expected to kind of run your cases in the room without somebody with you all the time. So that's kind of a scary phase that we're transitioning into. A lot of my clinical preceptors now are saying, hey, you're about to transition, so why don't we go ahead and let me just sit back and watch you do the case by yourself. And people have done that in the past here or there, but now that they're like really pushing you, they're actually saying like you are expected to be on your own now. So now I want you to not ask me, should I do this, or should I give phenylephrine, or would you give this, fentanyl, or would you turn up your SIVO? Or they don't want you to do that. They want you to do it, and they want you to do what you're thinking, and then they're going to watch you, and then they'll tell you they're not going to allow you to harm the patient, but they don't want you second guessing yourself all the time. They want you to build up that confidence. So that's a different kind of mindset that we're going through right now, but it's good. And so on top of the actual clinical days that we're doing, and then the research that we're doing on projects and things like that, we're also doing what's called fellowship. In your third year, you start fellowship hours, and you have to do so many hours, so many hundreds of hours of fellowship time each semester. And what that means is it can't be clinical related, it can't be related to other courses you're doing. It's you doing independent research outside of that time. So in my free time, I have to be doing more research on the newest, AICDs that are being placed, or this new technique for xenon gas or something that you could be using to induce a patient. So there's a lot of different types of things that you can do for fellowship hours, but a lot of it is pretty much just expanding your mind and expanding what you know about anesthesia that's not directly related to school. It's you going above and beyond your baseline stuff for boards or your baseline stuff for your research classes, and you doing even more than that, and just pretty much saturating if you're driving in your car, you're listening to new topics and podcasts about anesthesia. It's a way that it keeps you engaged, and it also continues to push that kind of idea that you're an anesthesia professional. This isn't just a job you're doing. This isn't a career that you've picked out. This is something that you will spend the rest of your life, even in your free time, researching and investing in and looking up the newest and most cutting edge techniques. And so that's kind of part of it. And so they're just trying to get you used to that through these fellowship hours. So John Koniak wants to know, what procedures do you do as an SRNA or a CRNA? So the first thing is, of course, peripheral IVs. You're gonna have to get really good at those. I know a lot of people have probably done hundreds of them as a nurse, or maybe thousands or more. There's a special, there's a special skill to it as an anesthesia provider. You're expected to get IVs on people who are the hardest to get. You're the last line of defense. So there's an extra level of pressure about peripheral IVs now on you. You'll get calls from the floor where everyone's stuck on, 6 times already and they can't get anybody. And so you're like their last line of defense. So there's a lot of stress behind getting good at peripheral IVs. So you'll get better at them, better than you are now. The next thing that you do, of course, is intubate. That's another skill that CRNAs are, constantly doing. Another skill, central line insertion, arterial line insertion, spinal anesthesia. You'll do epidural anesthesia. Peripheral nerve blocks, you'll study that in school and you'll have to do that in clinical. Next question, Josiah Staggers wants to know, what are some tips and tricks for intubation? So intubation, that's the big scary thing. Day one of clinical, you're gonna come in, you're gonna know they're gonna want you to try and intubate, and you're gonna feel terrified. Unless you were maybe a paramedic beforehand who did it, a handful of times in the field or something, you've probably never intubated a patient. You've probably assisted on hundreds of them in the unit, just like I had, and you thought like, it doesn't look that hard. But then when it's that day that you walk in and they say, here's a laryngoscope, now you intubate the patient, that's a whole different level of responsibility, and you have a whole different level of fear now with that. So tips and tricks for a good intubation. And I'm still learning this, I'm still honing this skill. So by no means is this some expert, experienced opinion. I've done hundreds of intubations at this point, but I'm definitely not, the expert to ask on this, but I've got some tips I can tell you. First thing that I'm going to tell you to do is positioning is important for intubation. So get them in a sniffing position. You've probably never heard of that before. You're going to hear of it when you get into CRNA school right away. But if you just want to Google sniffing position, it'll show you an image of what kind of position I'm talking about. So you want them in that good position. It's going to line you up so that your axes are going to be right in view, so you're going to have an easier straight shot, especially on those difficult patients who it's hard to get a clear view of their glottis. Other thing, stay calm. This is easy to say in retrospect, but I know in the moment, especially your first 15, 20, 30 intubations, you're very scared, your hands are kind of shaky, you're afraid you're going to hurt somebody, or the patient's going to desat, or you're going to chip a tooth. Maybe your CRNA or MDA who's helping you is really, telling you hurry up, and they're browbeating you because you're not moving fast enough or you're making mistakes. Don't let it get to you. Stay calm, because you will find yourself making really dumb mistakes. The more anxious you get, the more nervous you get, the more stupid mistakes you'll make, and the more you'll kick yourself later, because you know that normally in your normal state of mind, you wouldn't have done something like that, and you might have made a mistake that you wouldn't have done. So just stay calm. Try and stay calm when you're intubating them. Another good thing to do, start with a Mac blade. That's what a lot of people start off with, is a Mac blade. If they try and start you off with a Miller blade right away, I'm not going to say you should never do that, but I'd say for probably a good first year, try and use the Mac blade. The Mac blade is just an easier starting tool to use, a laryngoscope to use. I have transitioned in the last couple of months to using a Miller 2. I use a Miller 2 on almost everybody. I prefer a Miller 2. I get a better view. A Cormac-Lehane view is much better with the Miller 2 in my opinion. I get it almost every time. It's a much smoother process for me. But like I said, that was 10 months into clinicals, and I've done hundreds of intubations and stuff. So it's not something that I would have been able to do right off the bat. I tried using the Miller back probably 2 months into clinicals. I'd probably done 30 or 40 intubations at the time, and I was terrible at it, and I fumbled around, and I got very frustrated. So try and stick with the Mac blade. That's pretty helpful. Another good thing to think of when you're intubating, when you're going in, try and lift your instinct reaction, and I still sometimes find myself doing this, is to crank back, because especially with a Mac blade, the way it's shaped, you think with physics, the way you're going to get that tongue up and the way you're going to see that glottis opening is by doing this number, and you think it's going to lift the tongue and pull it so you see the view. That's not correct. You want to pull towards the opposite corner of the ceiling. A professor taught me this, and they said anytime you're not seeing what you want to see, especially with the Mac blade, instead of pulling back like this and what's called cranking back, and usually you're going to hit the teeth when you do this, instead of doing that, pull forward, lift the jaw and pull forward, and it's going to reveal it to you a lot better. You're not going to crank back on the teeth. It's just a whole lot better of a technique, and trust me, somebody's going to tell you to do that 40 times before you start really understanding and doing it. Just try and remember to do it maybe 30 times instead of 40 times. So anyway, that's a couple of tips. You're going to learn all kinds of stuff when you get into school and start intubating, and there's just something about physically doing it and seeing it, different patients' anatomies and airways and stuff, that I can't just tell you on a YouTube video and you absorb and get. So in the right time, you'll get better at it. So Donnie wants to know, how do I balance, or how does this SRNA balance like wife, kids, husbands, family, and being a CRNA student all at the same time? That's a really good question. I feel like I've addressed that a couple times in different videos here or there, but I'll just tell you, time management is a big deal if you're going to balance out all of these different elements of your life. Another big important thing is understanding that CRNA school is your number one. It feels strange to say that, because you think when you get married or you have kids and stuff that they're your number one, and that you're probably going to CRNA school partly not just from your own professional development, but because you want to provide a better life for your family and kids. So it seems strange to be like now they're on the back burner, but it's how it has to be. If you're going to get through CRNA school, you have to decide that CRNA school is your number one and everything else is two and behind. And sometimes all you're gonna have time for is your number one. There won't be time for everyone else behind you. And so you're just gonna have to explain it to them day one of school, or even before you start school. Explain, for the next 3 years, you guys are gonna have to, deal with me being busy all the time. And me not being able to make it to your dance recital, and me not being able to make it to your football game, and me not being home for dinner a lot of these nights. And sometimes you'll have away rotations where you may not see them for weeks. You might be gone and you might just be FaceTiming them at night when they get home from school or whenever you get off from clinical. So there's a lot of really hard sacrifices that you have to make when it comes to CRNA school. And it's not just for a couple months, it's years you will have to make these sacrifices. And when we had at least 2 classmates who just couldn't. They thought they could do it and they thought they knew what they were getting into, and about 2 semesters in, they just said, I can't do it anymore. Their marriages were suffering, kids were suffering. There's a lot of issues and stuff that come up with CRNA school and with telling your family and friends you're on the back burner now. And so sometimes you have to make that decision, like what's more important. For these 2 students, they chose their family was more important, and they weren't going to risk it and compromise it, and so they left, and so they went back to bedside. But that's just something really important. I know it sounds tricky. You have to make CRNA school one. I don't want it to sound like doom and gloom and like everyone's going to go through a divorce. It is a possibility. You have to make sure that you're prepared for that. We did have a classmate go through a divorce in school, and so it's not that uncommon for that kind of stuff to happen. The stress of CRNA school will bring out problems in relationships and issues that were already going on. It's going to bring them out probably even worse now. So go into CRNA school prepared. Go into CRNA school with your life set up the way that it really needs to be, and everyone connected to you in your life understanding what you're undergoing and them signing up for it too and being ready for it. When you graduate, take them all out to a steak dinner, buy your kids a nice car one day when they turn 16. You'll be able to do things for them and repay them in the long run. But for now, they really got to understand. And in the short term, for the people who do make it successful with their wife and kids and their families, I have some friends who, of course, have wife and kids, and they time manage really, really well. That is, you're going to have to get like a master in time management. So you will have to study all day, and then you will have a certain hour that you'll cut off the studying, and then you will guarantee that for 30 minutes every night you are going to just sit and talk with your kids and do high yield quality time with your kids or your wife or your husband or whoever. And it's not going to be a lot of time, and it also means you're not going to get to go have fun instead of watching TV or going out with friends or doing other fun stuff you might want to do, concerts or something. You're not going to get to do that because that little bit of free time you're going to have will be with your family, just trying to build that family quality time where you guys connect and kind of make it through this hard process together. All right, question number 4. Rachel Hudson wants to know, what is the typical day like at this point in your program? So like I said, we're about to be third years. We become third years in July. Right now, what we have is clinicals Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Monday and Tuesday is mostly days reserved for my DNP project and my 3 research classes that we have online, that we have projects and forum discussion boards and just pretty much continual research that you have to do all the time. And so I spend all of that time doing that through the week, and then on the weekends I usually do a little bit more of the research and try and catch up on that. It takes a good bit of time, but our schedule actually is more opened up right now in the program than it's probably been since the very beginning when we first started. So it's actually not a terrible schedule right now. We're in July, when we switch to third years, we're in clinicals more. We have to start doing stuff like weekend call and trauma and all kinds of more intense stuff that's more stressful on us physically. So at that point it gets a little worse, a little more stressful. But for now, we're at that transitional period where we have like a month in the end of May, early June, where it's just kind of it's more of a manageable schedule. So the last question comes from Will Ulrich. He wants to know, how did you interview and get a job in the ICU? And did you tell them you were leaving for CRNA school as soon as you could? And also, what was your typical day like in the ICU? So when you start in your interview process for the ICU, do not ever tell them you are going to CRNA school or NP school right away. Unless you have already been accepted into these programs, you're essentially, you would be lying to them anyway, because you don't know if you're going to get in or not. And there's no point in telling them, I would like to do this one day, or I have aspirations and goals to do this one day. Trust me, there are probably 70% of the people in the ICU who are working there and have been there 15 years who could tell you at one point they were going to go to CRNA school. It is a very, very common idea and goal to go to CRNA school when you get into the ICU. Or if you're not going to do that, the other percentage want to go to NP school. So a lot of those, I mean, if you want to go to NP school, you're probably going to go to NP school. It's not that unusual. If that was your goal, it's pretty common for you to go on to NP school and get that done. But there are numerous people that I know personally who were going to be CRNAs and just, they either never got in, or they just changed their mind, or they got busy and started having kids, and then they couldn't afford to be out of work, and just life got in the way, and they just could never get in or get their application together to go. The stuff happens. So don't go into your interview telling them, I'm going to be a CRNA one day. You go into your interview telling them, I want to be the best ICU nurse that I can be. I want to dedicate 110% of myself to this unit. I want to create, quality initiative changes on the unit that will decrease infectious rates here. I want to be part of the leadership team one day after I get more experience. You tell them, I want to get my CCRN certification. And truthfully, if you want to be a CRNA, you want to do all those things, because those are the things you need to do to get into CRNA school. So you come in and you tell them, I'm going to be the best I can be at this. And then if along the way, if you meet all those benchmarks, you get your couple years of experience in, and at that point you're like, you know what, I really do want to go to CRNA school, and life is set up where I can go to CRNA school, then apply. You still may not get in. A lot of people apply and don't get in. And a lot of times people who do eventually get in don't get into their first school they apply to, the first year they apply. So don't be upset if you apply and you don't get in. You might apply and not get in and say, I'm going to go to NP school. I have a couple of friends that did that and said, I'm not waiting around a whole other year and to reapply next year for CRNA school. I'm just going to go to NP school. That sounds like a good deal too. So they go to NP school instead. So my point being, life is very unpredictable. Never go into your interview stating exactly what you're going to be doing, years down the line, because you just don't know. Go in telling them you want to do the best job that you can do. And the other part about what my typical day was in the ICU, it depends. Sometimes I worked night shift, especially when I did travel nursing. Some contracts were night shift, some days were day shift. Most of my time in the unit was day shift, which is what I preferred. Usually you come in, you get report. You go see your patient. You usually have 2 patients, sometimes 1 patient. You go see your patient. You do a very thorough assessment on them. I might stay in the room for 45 minutes, doing assessments, making adjustments on them, doing whatever I have to do to really make sure I know this patient. Then you go chart your head-to-toe assessment, which can take another hour or so. And then it's time for their 9 o'clock meds, their morning meds. You'll do those things. And all throughout this, you're going to be titrating drips, you're going to be talking to family members, you're going to be answering phone calls, you're going to be coordinating the 6 or 8 specialist physicians who are all seeing these patients and all wanting to talk to you at this time, and all wanting to know what did the other guy say, and did they talk to the family, and did this antibiotic work for the patient, or did you notice vital sign changes at this time, or whatever. And they'll all want to know what levels you've titrated your drips at, because sometimes you'll titrate your drips but you don't update it in the system immediately because you're busy taking care of the patient. So they want to make sure, if they just look at what's in the computer, it might be the wrong titration numbers of what meds they're on, so they don't want to be unaware. You may have even turned some drips off and they may not be aware of it. So I've had a few younger docs not understand that and chart amiodarone drip on at this or whatever, and put it in their note, and then later realize I had already turned off the amio drip, or they were already someone else had canceled something. So anyway, it's important to chart, get your meds done, take care of the patient, and then you will pretty much then get ready to do your afternoon assessment, and then this cycle will continue to go. You'll go down to the CT lab, you'll take your patient to CT a lot of times, you'll do nuclear medicine testing on them. There's pretty much anywhere the patient has to go that's off the floor, you have to go with them and stay with them the whole time and monitor them and make sure they're safe and then you come back with the patient. Nobody touches your patient without you being aware of it and you knowing what they're doing and you coordinating phlebotomy and radiology and respiratory therapists and physical therapy and speech therapy and dietitians. The list is endless on day shift, especially in the first, from like 7 to like 2 p.m. You will have tons of people that you'll just be coordinating stuff between, and you'll be trying to update everybody on what's going on and trying to get them to update you on what they're suggesting and recommended changing. So it's a very interdisciplinary approach in most ICUs. So that was your typical day, and you were going to do that until about 7 p.m. when your night shift people came in. You gave a report to them. Then you would go home, get some sleep, and you would come back and do it again, and you pick the patient back up again. So it was like a cycle, and a lot of times you would do 3 or 4 days in a row, and just kind of like you just lived it felt like you lived on the unit on your day stretches like that. So anyway, that's like your typical day in the unit. If anyone else who's an ICU nurse wants to chime in and say like something that they remembered that I left off about being on the unit, you guys can do that in the comments below. All right, so this video has been long enough. I'm gonna get out of here. I actually have to drive to an away clinical site now, and so I'll be ready to be there first thing in the morning. So that is everything. If you guys wanna follow me on Instagram, you can. It's Bolt SRNA. I update the stories pretty regular over there. I also have the Twitter that I do stuff on every once in a while. And then of course you can like and subscribe this video and follow me here. And if you have any questions, comments, or anything like that, you leave that in the comments below and I'll get back with you. And that's Bolt out.